Hello, I'm James Barth, and today I'd like to tell you about our rock hard 4x4 skid plate system that we make for the JLs and the JT trucks. Now, there's a little bit of motor mount differences between the 4-cylinder and the 6-cylinder and the Gladiator trucks, and so we have a bracket change that we'll show you between the different ones, but the skid plate system is pretty much the same throughout all of them. It's available in 1/4-inch aluminum and 3/16 steel. Now, a couple of the things that set our skid plate system apart from others. When we originally were designing the skid plate system for the JL over the JK that we've been building since 2007, we ran into a couple problems, and one is the distance between the front axle or the front of the oil pan to where the cross member is with the new 8-speed transmission. It moved the cross member further back in the Jeep, this making what we would originally have as the oil pan skid longer. When we originally built this, we designed it with that oil pan skid longer, and we went out and did quite a bit of testing, and we weren't able to get the strength that we needed to give you an adequate system with that. So what we did is we went back and sat down and we re-engineered the skid plate system to what we've come with now, which has these dual cross member systems in it. So what we've added is, if you look right here, we've added this 1-inch by 2-inch solid steel piece of cross member, not a tube, but a solid piece of steel. We've machined it and drilled it and tapped it where needed, and this has allowed us to get the bracing that we need so that we can give you the strength that we need. The oil pan skid is now shorter, and then we have this full belly pan that goes across the complete center of your Jeep, this making a coverage far superior than anybody else in the industry and what you are needing on your Jeep. Then you have a resonator skid and your fuel tank skid. They're available for your 4-cylinder Jeep, your 6-cylinder, 2-door, and 4-door, and Gladiator truck. Now on the 4-cylinder skids, there is an additional skid that goes right here that it covers that big battery pack area that you have underneath. It's right out in the open, and if you put your Jeep over a big boulder, you're going to be knocking into that battery system. We don't want that to happen, so we built this skid plate system. We're going to go ahead and show you how to install this on each of your vehicles. We're going to show you how to install your skid plate system from Rock Hard 4x4 on your Jeep JT Gladiator here. Now, we have it up in the air so that we can show you and get you some pictures from better angles. This can be done on the ground. We're going to remove this cross member here along with this transfer case factory skid. The transmission cross member, the main cross member, does stay in the vehicle. We are going to remove this little T cross member in front of it also. We'll go ahead and do that now using an 18mm socket. Now that we've removed the cross members out of the way, we're going to go ahead and start off by installing the motor mount bracket on the left-hand side, the driver's side, that will go to our arm that comes down to the oil pan skid. We're going to go ahead and install the motor mount bracket in the back hole of the motor mount. You're going to put the lock nut on the top and the 1/2-inch bolt through the motor mount. You will notice that there's no bends on the top side, but there is a slight bend right here on the bottom. Now we're going to go ahead and install the passenger side bracket. Put the bolt through the arm, and you're going to install the nut on the top side. Now that we've hung the brackets coming down from the motor mount, we're going to go ahead and put one bolt in the center of this belly pan skid and hang it from the cross member. This will allow us to slip the big cross member in from the back, which is the one that is machined for the gas tank, and the one from the front. As we do this cross member, you're going to go ahead and bring it up here, line it up with the fuel tank skid, and bring it up. Look at your front belly pan skid. You'll see that we have the 2 outer bolts, and we have these 2 here where the oil pan skid and where this bolts into the cross member. These are, the bolt pattern is shifted to the passenger side. So when you bring your cross member up, make sure you have it oriented accordingly. When you're doing this on a hoist, make sure that you allow enough room on your hoist to where you rack it to get this cross member in place. And start your outer bolts on each side with a tapered washer on them. On the passenger side, you're going to put a spacer in between the cross member and the plate. Go ahead and install the silver bolt with the taper head protector, and go ahead and just start this into the frame. Leave everything loose. You want to make sure that you leave all bolts loose until we've completed the install. Now we're going to go ahead and take 2 additional center cross member support bolts and go ahead and install them with tapered washers. These are also the black bolts that are included in your hardware kits. Now we're going to go ahead and start with the actual oil pan skid of this installation. You're going to identify 2 1/2-inch by approximately around 1 1/4 inch long bolts and 2 tapered head protectors. You're going to go ahead and put the protectors on. You're going to grab the oil pan skid. You're going to hold that up in place on the cross member here and install the bolts. Be sure to leave everything loose. Because we've left our motor mount brackets, this arms coming down from the motor mounting area, from the frame, loose, we can move them around. They go on the inside of the skid. You want to line them up, push it up, and then put a bolt in to hold it in place. Then go ahead and install the nuts on the inside. Now we're going to go ahead and install the resonator bracket. This will be done into this rear cross member on your Jeep. You will go ahead and install it, leaving it loose. Now that we've set the pan up in place, we're going to install 2 12mm bolts on the outer edge into the factory nuts that are inside the frame. Once again, leaving all hardware loose. Next, we will install the carriage bolt with locking nut. Now we'll go ahead and install the brace through to the skid plate using a 3/8 bolt and the nut on the back side. One thing to remember is we do not remove the factory fuel tank skid. This is a hanger for your fuel tank. Now we're removing the fuel tank bolt on the right beside the drive shaft in the center of the fuel tank using our 18mm socket. We will remove the bolt and install the bracket. Now this bracket is the one that has a bend on both ends. Once again, leaving all hardware loose until the installation is complete. Before you install the fuel tank, we need to remove the 2 mounting bolts on this side. Now we're going to remove the bolt by the fuel tank by the right rear tire. You will remove it using an 18mm socket, and then you will install a bracket and bring our new bolt with a 19mm socket. This particular bracket is very similar to another bracket used on the fuel tank, but it only has 1 bend on this upper end. Now we're going to go ahead and install the fuel tank skid. A little pro tip is to slide the fuel tank in between the cross member and the belly pan and then install the rear bolt. This will hold it in place. Now we're going to go ahead and use an 18mm socket and remove this mounting bolt here on the fuel tank. Now we've went ahead and installed the bolt that holds this hanger in place. This rear bracket is the one that has the taper towards the upper side. Now that we've set the fuel tank skid in place, we'll go ahead and make connections at our braces using the 3/8 bolts and nuts included. Now, in your hardware kit, you're going to find 2 black washers. One goes right here as a spacer, and one right over here as a spacer. Now you're going to take, there's 3 carriage bolts that are left over. 2 larger ones that go on the outside with the nut on the top. The smaller one in the center. And the other larger one here. Now we're going to go ahead and install this skid plate. This goes on the driver's side off of the suspension bolt here. Now, it helps protect the exhaust. One thing to keep in mind is if you have a suspension that allows a lot of dropout, don't necessarily run this skid if you're concerned about clearance. We're going to go ahead and remove the nut on the control arm. This will allow this to slip on. Then we will take this nut plate, put it on the inside of the oil pan skid, and thread the bolts up from the bottom. Now we've got every component installed. Everything is still loose. Now we're going to go ahead and start tightening each of the bolts. We're going to start at the cross members. Front and back cross members, you're going to tighten all the bolts on them first. Then you will go to the resonator skid, the fuel tank skid, and your oil pan skid. Let's go ahead and tighten everything up and finish your install.